Truth in My Days podcast, where we defend the Word of God against the challenges of men.
Hello all. Today we have Sonia interviewing John about the last 12 verses of Mark chapter 16. Liberal scholars claim that this is an inauthentic passage, but is this true? Have a listen and find out. We are continuing from the previous episode. We hope you enjoy.
The reality is that it's present about 1,700 manuscripts, absent only in those two, and their testimony is questionable. That's as far as the manuscripts go. Now, the lectionaries. Now, I think we mentioned this in another program. A lectionary is a text of the gospel books that are not written necessarily in the order in which you find them in the actual original books. They're sections copied down to read in church services. They're called lectionaries. And the lectionaries, all of them have it, the last 12 verses of Mark.
About how many lectionaries do we have?
Hundreds minimum. I've heard 2,000 actually. I don't know if that's correct, but definitely hundreds. The versions. Now, by versions we mean the ancient translations into other languages. They will boast that, Old Latin. That's supposed to be one of the earliest translations. They say the last 12 verses are missing in the Old Latin Codex Bobiensis. The reality is, yes, it's missing from Codex Bobiensis. It's in every other Latin manuscript, of which we have a good 8,000. We're told that the last 12 verses are missing in the Sinaitic Syriac manuscript. Yes, it is. About 1,001 Syriac manuscripts is missing in one and present in 1,000 of them. We are told that it is missing in about 100 Armenian manuscripts. Yes, but it is present in the large majority of them. And furthermore, the earliest Armenian manuscript is from the year AD 887, too late to be significant. Okay, so the attempt to claim that the versions are against the last 12 verses is really not correct.
Okay, but isn't it a coincidence of all those different versions? If they're missing something, they all happen to be missing that same passage.
Oh, they're missing other things as well. But here's the thing. Isn't it a coincidence that almost all of them have it? Is it easier to think that one copyist missed it, or perhaps one copyist was using a Greek text missing it, like Codex Vaticanus? Or is it more reasonable to think that one guy got it right and everybody else added in a new ending that just happens to match?
Oh, yeah, I guess.
So we go to the church fathers there. Now, so we see they claim that Clement, Origen, Eusebius, and so on are against it. That's in the 3rd edition of the United Bible Society's Greek text. By the 4th edition, they dropped Clement and Origen, because as I pointed out, they're not witnesses against it at all. They also dropped Ammonius, they dropped Victor, they dropped Euthemius. These people that had previously been cited as witnesses against the authenticity of Mark 69, it never were. They were shanghaied as witnesses trying to add support for it, but they're not. Eusebius, for example, Eusebius explicitly quotes verses from this passage. So, let's look some more. Now, you ask, shouldn't we go by the earliest evidence? Okay, which is a good question. It's not necessarily correct, because let me put it this way. There's an auto accident, and you have 102 people witnessing the auto accident. And 100 of them say that the guy in the back rear-ended the woman in front. 2 guys say, no, the woman in front backed her car into the guy behind. 100 against 2. Who are you going to go with?
The 100.
But suppose the 100 were 20 feet away and the 2 were 10 feet away. Then who are you going to believe?
Oh, I guess the 2.
Would
they're
you?
in a position to see it better.
Really? So 100 people from 20 feet away can't see it? Would you actually go with the 2?
Well, I don't know, especially the 100 people, they might be blocked by each other.
Some might be blocked by each other, but they say they saw it. But let's add this now. Those 2 start saying, yeah, the woman backed into the guy behind her. And one of the 2 says, yeah, she pulled out of her driveway and plowed into him. And the other guy says, no, she was across the street and pulled into him. And the first guy says, yeah, she couldn't see because she was wearing sunglasses. And the other guy says, no, she wasn't wearing sunglasses. One after another, their testimony begins to contradict each other. You begin to suspect these people are not very reliable witnesses. Would you still go with those two?
No.
So there we go. We have these two, Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, who are closer, though not by that much. We have the long ending in Codex Washingtonianus, which is late 4th century, so not that much further. We have 1700, not 100, testifying to it. The two who are closer also are contradicting each other, though right and left. However, if we want the earliest evidence, let's look at the Church Fathers. Because the Church Fathers, when it comes to the actual specific wording of the text, of course you want to go with the actual manuscripts, but when it comes to whether something is there or not, the Church Fathers are extremely important evidence, particularly since we know the dates for them, generally, so we know when they were writing this. Very important Church Father Irenaeus, and we've mentioned him before. He was a student of Polycarp, who was a student of the Apostle John. Writing around the year 180, he actually quotes Mark 16:19. This is what he writes in Against Heresies 3.10.5. Also, towards the conclusion of his gospel, Mark says, so then after the Lord Jesus had spoken to them, he was received up into heaven and sitteth on the right hand of God. Now that's an exact quote from Mark 16:19. So when Irenaeus says that, does that mean that the manuscripts of Mark he has, does that include the last 12 verses or no?
Well, it at least includes up to 19 anyway.
Well, yes, so it'll include that last section. Certainly it has post-resurrection appearances. Now, look at the date, 180. Codex Sinaiticus 325, which is the earlier evidence. Irenaeus by far. Now, Tatian, we've mentioned Tatian before. Tatian wrote the first Gospel Harmony, where he takes the 4 Gospel accounts and stitches them together into one continuous account on year 170, maybe 175. In his Diatessaron, he includes the last 12 verses of Mark. So here's his date. He's even earlier than Irenaeus. 170, 175. What was the date of Codex Vaticanus?
We say 300 something.
325. Codex Sinaiticus 350. Which is the earlier evidence?
Tatian.
There you go. And there are other ones as well who quote from the last 12 verses long before those two corrupt manuscripts came along. So if we're looking at what's the earliest evidence, we know as far back as we can trace the Church Fathers, which is into the 2nd century, it was there. So 2 manuscripts in the 4th century that omit it cannot override the testimony of fathers from the 2nd century who are quoting from it. So there's no really intellectually honest way to deny that the last 12 verses are authentic. You certainly, all they have are those 2 4th century manuscripts, which right on the face of it are not reliable. And as we've said, their testimony is already questionable. Now you do find in some very small number of manuscripts, you will have another ending. And this is, but they reported briefly to those with Peter all that had been commanded them. And afterward, Jesus himself sent out through them from the east, even to the west, the sacred and incorruptible message of eternal salvation. Now, they would say that, oh, see, this proves the last 12 verses are not authentic. But the reality is that the manuscripts that have this also have the last 12 verses. And they're late. The manuscripts that have both of these, Codex L from the 8th century, Codex C from the 9th or 10th centuries, Codex 83 from the 6th, 7th century, Codex 99 from the 7th century, Codex 274 from the 10th century has it in the margin, and then 579 in the 13th century.
Well, where did this other extra content come from?
Well, the fact that it's in the margin in 274 suggests that some scribe at some point wrote this as a marginal note.
Oh, and then some other scribe thought it was actually part of the text.
Yes, and that happens on occasion, but rarely, which is why it's only in a very small number of manuscripts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, along with Codex Bobiensis. So there you go. It's the fact that there's this other ending really doesn't change the fact that the last 12 verses are authentic, because the manuscripts have the last 12 verses along with this. Now, even the most flagrant liberal textual critic will admit that if we went only by the so-called external evidence, the manuscripts, the church fathers' quotations, we would have to admit that the last 12 verses are authentic. But they really, really, really don't want that because it destroys this opportunity to undermine the resurrection. So they switch to internal evidence. They try to claim that the vocabulary and the style of the last 12 verses of Mark are non-Markan. What would that mean, non-Markan?
Well, he doesn't use those words or grammatical constructions in other parts of Mark.
That's what they would try to say. They would point out that there are 17 words in this passage that are found nowhere else in Mark. They will say the distinctively Markan word euthus, immediately, is absent.
Maybe something immediately didn't happen in the last 12 verses.
Could be, yeah. The distinctively Markan word palin, again, is absent. The historic present is absent. What is the historic present, Sonia?
It's when the present tense is used to describe events that happened in the past to give a sense of vividness.
Yeah, so we do that in English as well. We would say something like, oh, yesterday I went to the store and I was in there and this guy comes up to me and he says, see, I've switched to the present.
But it's still clear that you're narrating something that happened in the past.
Yeah. So they'll say the historic present is absent. We don't have that in the last 12 verses. De is used as the main unit connector, whereas Mark prefers kai. And they will say that each of these by itself may not mean much, but the combination proves inauthenticity. What would you say to that? Does that sound reasonable to you?
Well, look, even when the writer uses a historic present, he doesn't use it all the time. And, well, des is a very common word. Just because Mark prefers kai doesn't mean he never used de.
Mm-hmm. So does it sound convincing to you then?
No.
Any one of these?
No.
Does the combination together sound as if it proves anything?
Well, no, because they all seem pretty trivial. So trivial that even if you added them together, the combination doesn't mean much either. And also, 12 verses, it just doesn't seem to be a very big sample size anyway.
Exactly. And here's one of the big problems with Bible scholars and textual critics. They have no idea of statistical analysis. It's not part of their training. And unfortunately, the mathematics does matter. It does have to come into consideration. Humans use language with all kinds of different vocabulary, different styles, depending on the purposes. The stories I made up to tell you girls when you were kids is not the same as the vocabulary and style you use in a sermon, which is not the same as the vocabulary and style that I would use in one of my articles for the website. And so here's the thing. Because of the variability, it takes a huge sample before you can draw any kind of conclusion about authenticity. G. Udney Ewell, who was one of the greatest, perhaps the greatest statistician, mathematician in these areas in the 20th century, wrote a book on this, and he concluded that it takes a minimum sample of 10,000 words for you to try to establish any kind of claims about authorship on the basis of style or vocabulary. And the last 12 verses of Mark are very, very much less than 10,000 words.
Thank you, everyone, for listening today. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but please join us for the next part, same time and same place. If you enjoy our content and think this is important material, the best compliment you can pay is by sharing this with your friends and family. This helps us out a lot. Also, if you enjoyed today's program, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to this podcast. We would love to hear from you. Thank you for listening to the Truth in My Days podcast with John Torse. We would love to hear from you. Please feel free to share any questions or comments you may have. You can reach us on Facebook, Instagram, MeWe, and YouTube. Simply search Truth in My Days as one word. Again, Truth in My Days as one word, no spaces in between. And you can connect with us. You may also visit our website for more comprehensive material and to learn more about our ministry. Our website is truthinmydays.com. Thank you.